All levels of government are faced with dwindling revenue and are looking for ways to save money. As a result, critical services for our elderly are facing budget cutbacks. Here to explain this important advocacy update is Council on Aging of West Florida's President, John B. Clark. Thank you for being here today, Mr. Clark.
I appreciate being asked. Thank you.
Well, this is a very interesting year in Florida's legislature, and there's a lot of things going on regarding these budget cutbacks. What does it look like overall for the elder in our communities?
Well, they're like somebody said, it's been at all levels of government, federal,
Right.
state, city, county. At the state level, of course, the state's facing $3 to $4 billion in deficit. And of course, they're looking at cutting budgets and where that will all fall out. We really won't know till the end of the legislative session, which I think is the first week of next month. However, we are doing elder care services are in better shape from the state point of view at this point in time than they were like 6 weeks or 2 months ago. At that time, the governor's budget, when he first introduced his budget, he had proposed some cuts in Medicaid reimbursement rates, which, as you know from reading the paper about ARC, they had to close some of their programs because of that. Well, fortunately, the Senate and the House did not include those in their budget, so that was pretty significant because cutting reimbursement rates, people say, well, that doesn't affect services. Well, it most certainly does, because that's how we get paid from some of our state programs. So, there are going to be cuts at the state level in some of our programs and services, but, it's not going to be as bad as we thought a couple months ago.
That's good. So there's a little bit of optimism back there.
There is some optimism from that point of view, but there is a lot of other areas we have some concerns about too.
And those state-funded programs that you're referring to, what are some of those?
Well, the primary source of funding from the state, there's what we call the State Community Care for the Elderly program. That's state general revenue money. That program was initiated back in the late 70s by Governor Graham at the time. And its purpose is to provide home and community-based services like Meals on Wheels, adult daycare, and so forth, so that help people stay in their homes. And those are what those programs and services are at the local level. So that's a pretty important program.
That's very important
Yes, it
for a
is.
lot of people in our area. The legislator has also talked about reforming Medicaid in order to control costs. Does Council on Aging receive Medicaid funding?
Yeah, this gets a little tricky. People sometimes don't understand, well, how will that affect what the Council on Aging does? Well, I'll try to explain it in simple terms. There's a program called Medicaid Waiver.
Okay.
What that program does is the federal government has said to the state of Florida, instead of spending some of this federal Medicaid money in nursing home care, you could take some of that and use it for in-home services.
Right.
That's what they call a waiver. They've been given a waiver by the federal government. So we get funds through the Medicaid Waiver Program to provide services like homemaker, personal care, case management, adult daycare, and so forth. What the state has proposed, and primarily because of the increased costs of Medicaid and because of $3 to $4 billion budget deficit, they're proposing that private for-profit, well, no, I shouldn't say for-profit, but private HMOs take over all the Medicaid operations. That would include the services and programs we operate. Now, people say, well, does that mean they're going to provide Meals on Wheels and daycare? No, but what it would mean is that these private HMOs would coordinate all those services. So the bottom line is that would mean perhaps the Council on Aging would no longer be involved in that Medicaid waiver program.
Right.
That's a very, very significant change in the way things are done in Florida, and it's a very significant change in the way we operate locally, too. And it takes control away from the local community.
Right.
It gives it to these
That are here.
these huge private HMOs, which I don't think is necessarily the best thing to do. But I mean, I'm not automatically just against it because it's a private for-profit company.
Right. Well, also Council on Aging receives federal funding for some of their programs. What are some of those programs that could potentially be cut because of the federal level?
Well, this is another area. People have been reading in the paper about the feds are billions of dollars deficit operations, trillions of dollars in debt. I mean, we can't even envision what that means.
Right.
And we get a lot of money from the federal government. We get a significant amount of money from the Old Americans Act, which again helps with Meals on Wheels, daycare, homemakers, personal care. And we also get money for our foster care parent senior companion program. the federal government recently, as you know, as part of the budget compromise, what they did was they made some significant cuts. We don't know just yet what those cuts will mean to our various programs, but I have no doubt that some of our programs will be cut back at the federal level because there's this push to cut back some of these programs. In fact, like the foster care, parent, senior companion programs, some of of our federal legislators, want to completely eliminate those programs. And of course, I think that would be just the dumbest thing that they could ever do.
Right.
Because these are programs that provide extra income to people. They help people remain active in the community. They help other older, frail people. They help children with special needs. This just would be a disastrous and I think very cost ineffective thing to do if they did that.
Now, will we have any say in what programs stay and go?
You only get as much say as you do influence. I mean, the bottom line is, we all have a say in our government, whether it's city, county, state, or federal. People do need to pay attention to what's going on. People do need to call their legislators if they support these programs. If people support the state general revenue programs, they need to be calling our state legislators, like Senator Gates and Senator Evers and Representative Ingram and so forth. If they support our federal programs, we hope that they would call our federal legislators like Senator Rubio, Senator Nelson, and Representative Miller at the federal level. So, you only get as much influence as you're willing to exercise. I mean, it's the people that make the final decisions. Legislators, go into office and they think they've got a mandate to do something, but people can have a great deal of influence on what ultimately happens.
So if somebody has a question about those people that you just mentioned and who they should contact, can they call Council on Aging or you and get those names?
Absolutely. Of course, they could call the, I was going to say property appraisal, that's not the correct term, but they can call the Board of County Commissioners or any one of those local government agencies, and they'll give them a list of all the elected officials, or they could call us at Council on Aging, and we certainly would send them a list of all those legislators. We would provide that for them.
Wonderful. And then I also understand that a big part of Council on Aging's state and federal grants is the requirement to provide local funding, which can be used as a match. Is that right? Will you explain to our viewers the requirements that local funding has to have?
Well, for the state, for a lot of our federal money and for a lot of our state general revenue, not all of our state general revenue money, for every dollar that they give us, we have to provide 10% of that dollar in what we call match. Therefore, the local funding that we get from the city, the county, United Way, those are our three major sources of local funding. The money we get from them is extremely critical because it matches that money. For example, last year we received $81,000 for the Community Development Block Grant Program. Not last year, actually, it's this current year. And that brought in almost $800,000 in federal and or state money. So it's very important. And there are going to be some very significant struggles with our local funding also, some very significant struggles.
So have you heard anything about the continuation of the match
funding? We have heard from the city, we've heard from the county administrator that they're going to propose to eliminate funding for community agencies like us. Of course, we are going to, what term I'm going to use, but we're going to have a serious discussion with the local elected officials, the county commissioners, because they're the ones that ultimately make the decision. And our argument is going to be that, look, these programs are very important to the community. In addition to providing this financial support, it also brings in money and support. But above all, it serves people who are the frailest, the poorest, those most in need, disabled people, frail, low-income elderly, our retarded citizens. These are all people that benefit from these programs. These are human beings that will be impacted by these funding cuts.
Very much so.
So we're going to be very aggressive in seeing that these cuts don't happen.
What can people in the community do to kind of offset? I know it's a big offset, but what can they do to get involved and help Council on Aging's programs and services so that we don't have to, lose some of those?
Well, I would hope that the main thing they would do is, of course, is call their either federal legislators, as I mentioned, the state, or their local county commissioners, or their local city council people, the mayor and the city council, and say, these programs are important. We ask that you continue to fund them. That would be the one thing. And of course, these two programs you had on the show today,
Right.
the Realty Masters and the Wibs and Stone website, go to those, and that's a good way to support the Council on Aging also financially. We appreciate the support we get from the community. As you know, the project you're working on, the home
Right.
makeover, we get a lot of support. But sometimes you have to have cash
Yeah.
to pay the bills.
Yeah.
I mean, the in-kind is really great, but sometimes it does take a lot of cash to operate the agency of the programs.
Of course.
And I will say this one thing about people in terms of government funding is what you're going to get when you go to talk to people, is their first thing that they will say to you is, well, we don't have any money. Well, number one, that ain't true.
Right.
That is absolutely not true. There is money. The question is, what is your priority?
And what are they using it for?
Exactly. When the federal government, the state, or the city does a budget, it's a policy statement. These governments are saying, these are the programs we think are important. If we don't fund them, we don't consider them important. So we don't want to get sucked into the thing that says, oh, well, that's true, you don't have any money, and wring our hands, because they do have money, and we're saying that the programs we offer our priority, should be a priority. We're not, and if you look at the county, for example, they only fund, and this is just one example, like maybe a couple $100,000 to community service agencies.
Wow.
This money has not increased in the past 10 years. It's decreased. So it's not like we're talking like millions of dollars.
Right, yeah.
We're talking a small amount of money,
It's definitely small.
which brings in a large return to the community in terms of human services and other funding.
So what are some ways that we can help our legislators see that we need this help, they need to take care of their people and their communities, besides reaching out to them?
Well, ideally, if anybody's watching this show, we're going to ask a lot of the people that receive some of our services if they would also contact you. Of course, we're not going to say you have to, but we're going to explain what's going on because they have a right to know, and say, you might want to contact your local officials and state officials and tell them how important these programs are. I mean, because they are important. And, just say in your own words what these programs mean. I was doing something yesterday, doing a report, and I came across a quote, and I'm going to screw it up, I know, but a lot of people have said this in a lot of different ways, but it says, the moral test of a government is how it treats its youngest, those that are in the shadow of life, that's the disabled, handicapped, and those that are in at the shadow of the end of life, the elderly. And, that's the moral test, in my opinion, of a government, how it treats its people, the least among them.
I agree. And we're seeing that all across the board, from school budget cuts to the elder services being cut. And so I think you've wrapped up and summarized very well what the future could possibly look like. But is there anything that you could add to what it might indicate?
Well, I would just urge people very strongly to be aware of what's going on.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on at our federal level with federal funding. There's a lot going on at the state with state funding and the local funding. People need to be aware of what's going on. And you'd be amazed at how, like what we do, the Council on Aging, the Meals on Wheels, Homemakers, all these services, you would be amazed at how many people's lives are touched. And it's not just the clients. It could be a relative, it could be a husband, a wife, it could be a son or daughter. And it just amazes me when I go out in the community to have people come up to me and say, my mother or my father got services, what it meant to them. So it's not just the people getting the services.
No,
everybody is impacted. Number one, we're keeping people out of nursing homes at the cost of $2,000 to $5,000 a year versus $58,000 to $60,000.
That's huge.
It's huge savings.
Huge.
So that's what we should be about and try to work on.
Yeah, there's a lot of people involved when you have an elder mom or or dad. So we need to definitely consider that. Well, thank you very much for being here and letting people know the current situation, and hopefully there's more optimism in our future.
Well, we hope so, but it's going to be a constant, vigilant struggle.
Well, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that we keep as many programs and services as possible. Thanks for coming in today.
Thank you.